This is about 300 grams of clay, and there may be some air in here. These were scraps, so I'm going to do what's called wedging. And this rotates the clay onto itself, which mixes the clay up, and it also forces air bubbles out. And then I'm going to compress it with my hands. See, I'm starting to flatten it with my hands. I always start out, what I'm making here is called a slab. When I make a slab, I start out just with my hands. I compress a bit, I rotate it, I flip it. It's starting to get pretty close to what I want. I want it to be 1/4 inch thick. Right now it's probably a bit closer to 3/8 or 1/2 inch. And then I have this really nice rolling pin. The ends of the rolling pin are 1/4 inch thicker than the body of the rolling pin. So as I roll across the clay, it will flatten it to 1/4 inch thick. If I approach the clay like this, the clay is just going to stick onto the rolling pin like that. Very annoying. So I start in the middle and I apply pressure on the ends here. If I press down really hard here, it can cause the rolling pin to bow. I know it's not enough of a bow that you would see, but it makes your slab a little more uneven. So go across, come back to the middle, and then I come towards myself. I was using about medium pressure. It doesn't take a ton of pressure. It's not like I'm trying to break the clay. I just want it to flatten. You can see a bit of movement that way, and now I'll come back and you'll see some movement in the clay this way. And I flip it and I rotate it 90 degrees. So the last time I was stretching the clay like this, and now I'm going to stretch it like this. I keep rotating it. It puts less stress on the clay if I rotate in different directions. And I know I'm done when both ends are in contact with the table all the way across. And there's no more movement in the clay really. So that's flat enough. And then I flip it one more time. And I have my pointer tool and I have a template of circles. I'm going to use a 3-inch circle. To make the base of my coil cup. And I press all the way through the clay and just slowly go around like that. Then I can pull the template off. I start on an edge and break it apart. And now I've got what will be the bottom of my cup. And so what I'm going to do next is start attaching the coil, this first coil, to my base. Okay? You can start out by measuring exactly how much coil you're going to need or what looks like it, like this, and make rings that come up. Or you can keep going and spiral on top of each other like this. To start the spiral, I pinch the end here so it's a bit of a ramp when the clay meets where it's already been. As this clay comes and goes on top of the first coil, it'll have a bit more of a ramp instead of a blunt end. Okay, so I'm going to start out. I'm going to go around this and score. And I keep getting water. So it gets muddy, makes slip. Slip is the glue that holds our pieces together. If I don't use water, I don't have slip. it's not going to work. If I don't score, it's not going to work. If I just had slip in a little cup and painted slip on it, it wouldn't work. It needs to also, the surface needs to be scored. It needs to be ripped up for this to really work. And then, let's see here. This is the underside of how I'm going to apply this coil. So I'm going to start going around on the bottom of this. I think that's pretty close to the first ring around. And so the third thing for a really good attachment is pressure. So I'm going to slowly go around. I don't want to smash the coil. That's just going to break off there. And you can see that's about how far. Now I need to start scoring some more on the bottom of this. And as I'm coming around, it's going to start going on top. So I also need to do some scoring on top of this first coil, the first layer of the coil, like this. So you can see how this is started. It's kind of smoothing out a little bit there. I'm going to put some pressure. It's about a medium pressure. There's a little pit there. And there's that little ramp I was talking about. So as this coil comes on, the coil starts to go on top of itself as it comes around. It's not, it's a, if this was a blunt end, there would be like a gap there, and I don't want a gap because I don't want my coffee coming out the bottom. That would be super annoying. With this first ring of coil, I go around and blend. I'm blending from this disc up onto the coil and back down and covering up the gap. So it starts to not look like a coil on top of a disc. It starts to look like all one form. I mostly do this just with my fingers, but you can use what's called a rib, a rubber rib, that will help fill in this gap between the first layer of coil and the base disc. This is just to make sure that the coil is really attached to the base and that it's waterproof at the very bottom. You can see there's some slip that came out when I applied some medium pressure to this. I could get a paintbrush and clean up the inside of this. Let's see here. I like having a slightly bigger container of water with the sponge and clean my hands occasionally as I'm working, so I don't have to get up and go to the sink. And when I clean with a paintbrush, I like having a rag. There's usually rags up at the front table. If you ever need a rag, let me know. But I clean out my sponge and I try to get as much water out into the water container, and then I get excess water out on a rag, and now it's like a damp sponge, and I'm not using that much pressure here because that slip that is right here is about the consistency of whipped cream. It doesn't take a lot of pressure. I'm just trying to even it out where I can see the scoring right there. Use a little more pressure and go across that and cover that up. Okay. And then, let's see here. I'm pretty sure this end came from right here. So that's where we're at. It doesn't matter if your coil breaks like this did. I just score the end of this. And now I'm going to score all the way around again. And then that's just going to break again. I think the clay could have been a bit damper that I put in there. If you choose to do coils, I'm going to use different clay that will not break so much like this is. So I scored that in. I'm going to go ahead and score this in because it's going to have to be connected to more. And attach that on there. Kind of smush this together. And then I would just keep going like this, adding more and more coils until I get this as tall as I would like the cup. As I'm putting coils on, if I keep putting it directly on top of the coil below it, it's going to come straight up. It'll come straight up. But if I put it at a bit of an angle, it'll start to flare out and the opening will get wider. So I did start this with 3. I'll probably come out a little bit wider to maybe like 3.5 inches wide, so that as the cup comes up, it's a bit wider with a bit of a narrow base. And so next, I just need to keep scoring on all of these and cleaning up as I go. And sometimes I'll totally smush the coils together on the inside and the outside where I can't see them, that it was a coil. It just looks like a vessel with a solid wall. And sometimes I like to leave it where it's obvious that I was working with coils. It's kind of up to you. A lot of times I'll leave it looking like coils on the outside, but I'll blend one coil into the next on the inside to make sure it's really super waterproof. And I'll blend that first layer down onto the disc as well. And if you want to do this, I recommend you do it as you go, because if you get it really tall, it's hard to reach down in there and blend this together later on the inside. I'm kind of doing 50-50. You can tell a bit that it's a coil. It's super wet from the slip from scoring. So it would be easier to blend these if it wasn't so wet in there. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and add a bunch more coils and come back for you to see. You don't necessarily need to see every second of coil building once you get the basic idea. But I'll show you what's possible. So I'll be right back. Okay, at this point you can see I did start going with laying the coils down on the outside edge, so it's starting to widen. And I've scored all the way around to here. Now I need to go and score the underside of this. And as it's going up, it's helping to have this rag. You could use a rag, you could use a piece of clay to rest the coil on if you need to set it down for a second while you clean up or apply pressure. So I've got it about as wide as I want it, so I'm gonna make a transition from applying on the outside edge to going straight back on top again. Like that. This coil was a bit happier. It didn't have as many breaks as that first one. So I'm just gonna score all the way around where this next little batch is gonna make connection. And score underneath. Can lift it up a bit and look under there, make sure I'm getting a good connection. A good scoring. Everybody likes a good scoring, a strong vessel that will hold your favorite beverage. Yum. I started my day with coffee today. Now, when I was in high school, I didn't like coffee. I thought coffee was stupid. Did like iced tea, but I was growing up in Texas, so iced tea is almost like the national drink of Texas. There we go. So you can see how the layers are starting to build upon themselves. It may crack a bit like that. I can smooth out those cracks with my finger really easily. I can use my paintbrush. And you can see how I can just keep going higher and higher until I have as big a cup as I want. I have had kids that start out making a pinch pot, you know, about this high. And then as high as they're comfortable making a pinch pot, and then have them add coils to that to make it taller. You can do a combination of a pinch pot and a coil pot. And the inside, like I was saying before, I would blend this together some. Let's see here. I believe I've got a rib handy. This is a red rib and it's very flexible. And I think I'm going to use the curved side. And you can see how it's starting to flatten that out together and blend those. If I come down the wall or up the wall at an angle, with it, what that does is it flattens it. It also cleans it. It's kind of like a squeegee. But blending those, the inside of the coils together makes doubly sure that it's going to be waterproof. And if you want a flat outside edge, you don't have to leave it in the appearance of coils. You could use this on the outside as well and just flatten the whole piece. And then this needs to be cleaned up more, and then add more coils, and then the same thing, I would just add a handle to it. So this is another way you can make a cup. And I will work more on this and show you a finished piece at the end. but that's going to take some time.